listening to the Decidedly podcast with Sanger Smith and Sean Smith. Our mission is to help business owners like you defeat bad decision making so you can improve your health, wealth, and relationships. We do this by digging deep into the stories and expertise of our guests and distilling their knowledge into actionable wisdom for you to carry into your life and business. If you're new to the show, welcome. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you won't miss out on any of our weekly episodes. If you prefer to watch this week's episode, head on over to YouTube for the full video. Now, let's get into this week's episode and defeat bad decision making in your life and business.
This time of year, every 4 years, clients always ask me, well, what do you think about the election? Well, what's going to happen with the election? What's going to happen to our money with the election coming up? And I tell them, if I were able to find a correlation between a particular candidate or political party and investment returns, I'd be thrilled to find it because I'd get to charge a lot more money. And the reality is, we can't find it because it doesn't exist, because that's not what moves the markets. Yeah, but don't you think, this client said, don't you think if Trump wins, it's going to be really bad? We should probably get out of the market. What I told him was this, regardless of who wins, whether it's Trump or Kamala, you have to remember that 50% of the country is thrilled and they have money too. So, I think we can easily create a lot more stress and overplay the outcomes of elections. But there are some other impacts. I'm not saying that as a voter, you shouldn't have your own opinion or your own concerns either way. I'm not saying as an American, you can't be affected positively or negatively by what politicians do or don't do. But instead of focusing on our concerns as Americans or voters, I'd rather focus today on our concerns as leaders. What can we learn from this election cycle uniquely and where we're going as a country? Today, Ken Coleman's on the show again to talk about his thoughts on the topic. You'll remember Ken from episode 141. He is a 2-time best-selling author. He wrote From Paycheck to Purpose and The Proximity Principle, and he's the host of the Ken Coleman Show on the Ramsey Network. We had a great time. We got into the election. So if you have questions, before you email me about what the market's going to do if so-and-so wins, listen to this episode, learn a little bit. I'm Sanger Smith, and this is Decidedly. So, Ken, we got the election coming up. Who's going to win?
I'm not sure. I would have said Kamala 7 to 10 days ago. And that's what I did say. But there's definitely a shift. There's no question there's a shift in 2 key areas that you got to pay attention to. The polling, for sure. But with a giant asterisk, because I can't remember how long it's been since I trusted some poll numbers, just off of how some national elections have gone recently compared to what the polls said. I'm not sure what to believe on polling, but you got to pay attention to the trend. And then there's no question that there is a tone among the media, the traditional liberal media. There's a tone, there's a word, there's some worrisome stuff going on. You can see it on these interviews and the talking heads. So that tells me there's some concern, some internal polling numbers. So this may be the tightest race we've ever seen. I don't know. It could be a blowout. I just do not know. And I wish I knew, but I do not know.
It's the $1 million question, right?
Yeah.
Everybody, I think every American, we feel this distrust, this innate distrust of the polls. I was just talking about it with my friends the other day. They go, man, have you ever been polled? Have you ever been polled? No. Who is answering these polls? And everybody seems to rightly distrust the polls, particularly with Trump, who chronically outperforms the polls. And then we had the polls in 2022 say that the Republicans were going to win in a landslide, and they didn't. So they're not even just wrong in one way or favoring one party. It seems to be something structural that's getting missed with the polling. But I hear everybody talking about these internal polls. oh, well, the campaign's got these internal polls. How would they have better information than the polls that are public?
Well, it's not that they have better information. It's that it's a little bit more specific and a little bit more targeted. So I used to work on campaigns a lifetime ago, and internal polling is we want the real. You don't want anything filtered. I know pollsters, and any pollster who's honest with you will tell you that you can get what you want out of a poll. You just can.
Meaning like you can manufacture it to get a result that you're looking for.
Yeah. It depends on who you're asking, what you're asking. You can shape poll numbers. So I think that we have to understand when we see all these different polls coming out that this is a business.
Yeah.
And so skewing one way or skewing another is advantageous to pollsters. So you've got all these public polling companies, but then every campaign hires their own polling firm. And so when you hear the phrase internal polling, that's not public information. And those pollsters are working directly for the campaigns. And so because of that, they want to know where they really, really stand. And so many times those internal polling numbers are far more accurate as to what's really going on, because again, there's no slant. It's like, tell me what the real is. I want to know where we stand.
Yeah, they don't want the fluff at that point.
That's right. No spin on those. So that's the inside baseball on that.
When were you working on these types of internal polls?
Well, I was working on campaigns when I was in my early 20s. So I worked on 8 campaigns in a small period of time in my early 20s, and then was working for the governor of Virginia at 23. And so, I worked on so many campaigns that I always was privy to our internal polling data. And so we would hire a polling firm to do that. So that's my background with that. But we're talking about a long time ago. I know it would shock many people. I'm no longer in my 20s, but
you're reformed. It's okay. We won't cast you with the broad brush of our negative opinions towards politicians. It's something that's on people's mind all the time from my perspective as an advisor, right? Well, who's going to win the election? How is this going to impact me? How's this going to impact the markets? And I think there's the lesson on how it's going to impact the markets or what we should do with our finances. The answer is really boring and lame. There's a lot of more interesting answers for like leadership that we can take away from the campaign. So, historically speaking, what the data shows us is regardless of who wins, the market's going to do what the market's going to do. Regardless of who wins, the economy is going to do what it's going to do. And, in some ways, depending on how conspiratorial you are, the government itself is going to do what it's going to do. But there is something to be said for the two very different leadership styles that we see on display and what that says about us as a culture. So everyone who hasn't been living under a rock can kind of tell the temperature's way up here. And the mudslinging seems to be a lot more frequent than it was, at least within my lifetime. The Bush-Gore election was probably the first one that I paid attention to, even as an elementary school kid. So is it true that this is a more vitriolic campaign and we're progressively getting, moving more in that direction? Or is that just our perception? And then if it is true, what does that say for us as Americans?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's debatable that the tenor, the tone of American politics right now is far more personal and far nastier. If you just look at the debates leading up to the presidential debates, just the debates on the Republican side for sure, because they were the ones with all the candidates this time, the constant interrupting and slinging of charges and insults, it's become the mode of debate now. And if you were to just go back, 15, 20 years and watch those debates, it was more about policy differences, certainly calling the other candidate out on, you voted for this and I don't think this is a good policy. And in return, I think we ought to be doing this, where you are comparing and contrasting policy differences. That's a good thing, but we've seen a nasty tone, many times insults. And look, this is going to offend some people, I'm sure, but I don't mind offending when I'm just making an observation. There's no question that Trump's style has changed all of this. It's just his style. I'm not attacking him. I'm not saying I'll keep it above the line here. Bottom line is that his style, his aggressiveness, the nickname giving, whether that be, you consider that to be just fun and playful, to nasty attacks and making fun of people. I mean, again, that's who he is. And so when you have somebody who is a force of nature, and I think that we can all agree, left, right, center, that Donald Trump is a force of nature. And we've never seen anything like him before. And so he comes onto the scene and dominates election on the Republican side, blows away the first primary and wins big. Close election, but beats Hillary Clinton. Then loses to Biden, and now he's back. And you guys just been on the scene, and he takes up all the oxygen. The media loves covering him, no matter what they act like. They love covering him. And so he has changed the environment. And I think to say that that's not true is to stick your head in the sand. Good, bad, or ugly, however you deem that he's changed it. To answer your question honestly, yeah, we've lost a tremendous amount of civility. And as a guy who loves the political system in our country, because I think it's the greatest one that's ever been invented. Yeah, I mean, I miss the days of a Reagan-Mondale debate. Go back and watch some of that stuff on YouTube. I mean, it's so far exceeds what the conversation is in today's world that it kind of shock you how civil it was. So yeah, we're more divided than ever. And let me also throw some credit where it needs to be thrown. It's not a fault issue. I'm not saying it's all Donald Trump's fault, but we also have 24-hour media. We have social media. So you take those two things and we're just constantly being divided and given a chance to brand ourselves with this or this or this. And so we've just seen a splintering of American civility, and that's troubling.
How much do you think I've been thinking about this a lot within the context of Trump, right? It seems to me for sure that the change from civility to whatever you want to call what we're doing today is very, very stark. And the older the debate is that you go watch on YouTube, the more clear the difference is, right? Whether it's Reagan, Mondale, or Nixon, Kennedy, it's very, very different than what we see now.
Uh-huh.
How much of that civility was genuine as opposed to manufactured for the new TV environment that started with JFK and Nixon? Because there was a time in this country where politicians were beating each other with canes on the Senate floor and shooting each other in the street, like Aaron Burr. So
yeah,
is it the case that the civility was always the norm, or was it a new cultural phenomenon to be civil that we reached, and then because it's so fragile, it's evaporated?
Well, I think this answer comes down to subjectivity. My subject answer would be that it was not put on for the cameras. I think to know Reagan, and I read a lot about Reagan, he was probably one of the most agreeable, kind people we've ever met. So in his case, just kind of a likable soul. And even when he would take a shot at somebody, it was with a head tilt and a wink, Yeah. So that was his personal style. If you look at the Kennedy, Nixon debates, I think, again, it was just the time in which decorum was a part of the deal. If you were to have done some of the things we see now, I just don't think it would have been acceptable. So yeah,
I agree.
I think times have changed. So did they put it on? Maybe, but it was because this is the way things were. Now, to your point, there have been plenty of violent moments on the House in the House of Representatives or in the Senate, if we look back historically and to the early days of our country, for sure. But again, time period. I mean, that was also a period when if you felt insulted, you challenged somebody to a duel, and that's the Alexander Hamilton, Aaron Burr situation you're talking about. But that was a cultural thing.
Yeah.
It was interesting enough. It was illegal, but no one ever prosecuted it. It was pretty much this is what we do. If you offend me, and I mean, it could have been as simple as a sneering or sarcastic comment in a letter, for crying out loud, and okay. Meet me tomorrow morning and we're going to shoot at each other. That was a cultural norm. So I do think baked into your observation in the question, yeah, it comes down to where society is and what is acceptable and what is not. And let's be very clear, this election is coming down to two choices. Either you love Donald Trump or you hate Donald Trump. Those are your choices.
Yeah.
I really think that's what this is. And I don't think that Kamala Harris or Joe Biden inspire the Democratic Party like Barack Obama did, is my point.
Oh, definitely not.
And so I think he is such a huge figure, and you got millions of Americans who aren't happy with either choice and will not vote. So I think when we look back on this time in history, we will mark this as a watershed moment in American politics. I think we could call it the Trump era.
Sure. Is it possible, though, for us to put that return to a cultural norm of civility? Because it seems like it isn't if I observe even candidates lower down on the ballot and how they're debating. Down to local Senate races, like even state races, there's a obvious truth that this is Trump's style and it works for him. Again, like you said, whether you like it or not. But you've noticed that other candidates have adopted it who are running against him. Very hard to run against him if you don't if you don't fight that fight. But even when he's not on the ballot, even in the midterms, you see candidates who don't even support his positions, aren't allies of him, speak and act in a way that they wouldn't have 12 years ago.
Well, again, this is an example of dominant figures are influential. You can look at the world of sports. You look at Tiger Woods comes on the scene, and then, everybody starts wearing red golf shirts. I could go down the line. Michael Jordan, comes in and I remember when Michael Jordan came on the scene, all of us youngsters wanted to buy knee braces and wear it below our knee on our shin. My dad was like, "Why are you buying a knee brace and wearing it below your knee?" I'm like, "Because Michael Jordan does that." I mean, so when you have, dominant, charismatic figures, and Donald Trump is both of those things, and he has such a fervor within the Republican Party, so it just trickles down, and so that's pretty understandable. When Donald Trump leaves the scene, if there were to be another dominant character like a Ronald Reagan, and again, we've not seen a dominant figure, a charismatic figure since Reagan. So you had Reagan, and then you've not had that, and then Trump. So
would you not count Obama in that category?
Yes, I'm sorry. I was just thinking on the right side, but yeah, I think Obama, no question. Although I'd be interesting to talk to people that have a different opinion on that. I don't know that historically Obama has his own place. Obviously, he's the first African-American president, but a dominant figure in the Democratic Party. I don't know that he's more dominant than Bill Clinton. I think Bill Clinton affected a lot of politics. And so all that to say, it's sad, but it is a commentary on our humanness that when there's a dominant figure, we all kind of go, well, I'm going to be like him because he's getting all the votes. And so I've got to act like him. I've got to talk like him because I want to get elected. And I think that's a sad commentary on two things, on our humanness and on our integrity. And I think what we need more of are men and women, both sides of the aisle, conservative, liberal, whatever, who are genuine and who articulate a vision that policy matches up to. And that's what it's supposed to be about. And I'm afraid we've lost that. The word that comes to mind that I think is the best description of what this nation needs are statesmen. Men and women who realize that political service is just that, service. It's not a long-term play. It's not supposed to be a profession. It's supposed to be a service. And they're going to come to this thing with a vision of what they believe for their community, for their state, for their country. And then the vision is supported by policy. In other words, this is where I think we should go. And this is why I think we should go there. And this is how we will get there with policy. And so, the conversation on the stump or in interviews or on a debate stage, you should be able to, almost like you would watch an NFL football game and break down a play, you should be able to break down a candidate's content by, there's always clarity on this is where that candidate believes we should go. This is why we believe we should go there. And this is how we're going to get there. And it's through specific policy. This is what's missing from the national debate stages. It's nothing more than insults and accusations. There's no vision casting at all. And what I've described, where, why, how, is the form of vision casting. It's how great leaders cast vision. This is where we're going. This is why I think we need to go there. This is how we're going to get there. And if you look at the military, a sense of this is how they come up with an actual mission or an operation. So that's sorely missing in today's world. And I'll say one other thing on this. The best and brightest of us is not serving. We aren't serving. The best and brightest aren't serving. I think we have to ask ourselves why. And I think that there's several answers. I think the most dominant answer being it's not worth all of the crap and the headache, the attacks, the system is so gummed up that the best and brightest of us are used to getting stuff done.
You have to be extraordinarily unhealthily motivated by power to tolerate all of the slime and filth that's going to get thrown onto you if you even attempt to do something in the political sphere.
I think that's a fair point. I think that's a fair point, what you're saying. And I think that deserves great consideration as to how true that statement is.
And so what that gets us is only the people who are the most power hungry and the most have the most inflated egos are willing to tolerate that. And I think that's irrespective of which side of the aisle they're on.
Well, and so if you follow that line of reasoning, then what happens is the system continues to just perpetuate itself. So it's all about self-preservation. That's the whole point of getting in it. And so very little business is being done for the people. And so, I'm troubled.
Yeah.
I'm troubled by where we are because I look at the men and women that are representing us, and this is not a blanket statement, but I look across the board and frankly, as a guy who's in the business world and I'm a 3-time best-selling author and I speak and I do national media and I do all these things. So I have a perspective here that, I'm a professional communicator, if nothing else. Okay. And when I look at the contrast between how I have to communicate and to whom I'm communicating to and why and how and all that, and then I see, and that's in the business world, and then I also see in the ministry world and everything else, and then I look over here at the political world, I go, these two couldn't be any further apart. And
yeah, it's like the rules don't apply over there.
yeah, this is a joke, could to be completely honest.
Yeah.
And this is serious business over here. We're getting stuff done over here. This is this alternate reality where everybody just keeps showing up and having the same conversation day in, day out, month in, month out, year in, year out. And it's, if we were to grade this political group just the same way we would grade those in business or ministry in the real world, we would put all this out of business.
I think what we see, what you are rightly criticizing with our political atmosphere, actually can happen in business fairly often, but it doesn't happen with good businesses. Where I see it is,
here's
like,
the factor though. So when that happens in business, it goes out of business.
Sure,
cannot
yeah,
sustain
eventually.
Yeah.
It eventually is going to bury that business. But I notice it a lot in like a second generation business, is when the business has moved beyond the founder and there are people who find themselves in a position of power in the business that maybe didn't build up that position of power. They assumed that power position. It was created by someone else for someone else, and they did what was needed in order to find themselves in that chair. And I'm not saying that if you didn't start the business that you own, that you're a bad leader or a bad businessman. I'm only saying that it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, for someone to have founded a business without being a good communicator and get their way to the top through mudslinging. But sometimes people find themselves at the top of an organization that predated them, and they find themselves in that self-preservation mindset that a politician might have, where they go, you know what, if I can just keep this thing from crumbling, I'm going to collect my salary, I'm going to get my stock option plan, I'm going to get all the benefits, I'm going to be well paid, and I can buy that beach house if I can just hang on. And so they end up having a different motivation. And I see founders of businesses and some of them don't care. They want to sell their business and move on, take their check. They don't care what happens. Some of them don't. They want that legacy to perpetuate. And they're so disappointed because this thing that they couldn't have foreseen, because they don't have that mindset, ends up happening with their most beloved creation. It tears them up.
Yeah. No, it's a great observation. It's, again, what the underlying thing here is integrity. You know, integrity can be used in multiple different ways. The integrity of the individual, integrity of the business. And if we lose sight of that why, then you lose integrity as a person and as a business. You can lose the integrity pretty quickly.
Something occurred to me related to integrity a few years ago, which is that everyone thinks they have it, even the liars and the thieves. Like, nobody says, I don't have integrity, it's a bad thing, I don't want it. Because we all have an innate, like, we need to justify our own decisions, whether they were the right or the wrong decision. I mean, a criminal has a very compelling case in his own head for why he pulled the trigger and murdered that person. Like, it's very hard to live with yourself when you say, yeah, I messed up, I did wrong, that was the wrong thing to do. So even people who don't have integrity often say, I have integrity. When you say integrity, when you talk about integrity, what's true integrity that you're talking about? And how do you separate that from people who might say they have it but don't really?
Yeah, well, there's two usages of integrity, and I think for our conversation, it's important to point it out. You know, when I used it earlier, just a few minutes ago, I was speaking more to the usage of the strength. So you can use the word integrity when you think about a beam, okay, or a structure. If you look at the actual, let's say, you know, a physical building, you know, or a foundation of a building. And so the integrity can be used in that sense. In other words, is it strong? Can it withhold the weight? And so when I was using it earlier, that's the usage I was using it. The integrity of the business, you know, the integrity of a person, is there strength there? Is there some guiding principle? And then I said, you got to know your why. And as a person, if you lose sight of your why, I'm going to tell you, you are beginning to lose strength, okay, to be able to be who you say you want to be. Now, the other usage of the word integrity would speak to high character. Are you telling the truth? So does this person have integrity? So the reason I'm kind of going through both is we use one for our strength of a structure, if you will, or a beam. And then we say, then does a person have integrity? And I think it's interesting, right? And I think at the end of the day, it's, does this person have the strength to be good? And that was how I would define integrity. So do you have the strength to be honest? Do you have the strength to do what you say you're going to do? Do you have the strength to face fear? Do you have the strength to face doubt? Do you have the strength to have a hard conversation? Do you have the strength to pick up the red phone and order a strike to take out some bad guys and know that there might be some collateral damage, some innocent life left? Do you have the strength to do that? And that's what I think integrity is there on that side. So, I'm not trying to nerd out, but I do think sometimes we forget what words mean. And so that's what I believe integrity is.
Sure. And it seems like in a way what you're saying is, does the beam have the ability to do what it is designed to do? And that's true with a person, right?
Can it bear the weight? Can it bear the weight?
Yeah.
I'm going to keep coming back to that because I think that architecturally, when they look at the integrity of something, it is, can it bear the weight? Can it? And I think that the weight of being honest and the weight of being courageous, that takes integrity.
And if you can't bear the weight, you're not able to do the things that you ought to do, whether it's provide for your family, run the business, et cetera.
Yeah, that's right. You will crumble. Your business will crumble. The nation will crumble. Your campaign will crumble. I'm just going to say this because it just needs to be said. But I'm gonna do it in the form of a question for your audience. Okay?
Got it.
Can there be chaos and integrity at the same time? That's for your audience. I'll leave it there. Based on the conversation we're having,
I want to know what your answer is, because I think I would be inclined to say yes.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
I think can there be 100% unmitigated, unregulated chaos? No. But in a world with zero chaos at all, we would likely have no art. We would have no beauty. There's some dance between order and chaos that's got to happen in order for creativity to occur. And if we have no chaos, I don't know. I feel like I know I think you're going a different direction. This is a fascinating philosophical discussion. I think you're going another direction. At least I understand it that way. What I'm simply saying is that where there is integrity, okay, there is stability. That's the whole point. It would be difficult to have disorder, if not impossible to have disorder.
Yeah, I'm not saying that there's not a chaotic. I'm not saying society as a whole. There's always going to be chaos in this world. That's just, I get that. But I'm saying that if you were to look at a company, or you were to look at a political leader, or you were to look to a pastor, or you were to look to a family, I'm saying that where there is constant chaos and all of that toxicity and just dysfunction, and you could use the word dysfunction if maybe that's a better word. I'm telling you, you cannot have them both at the same time.
Yeah, I was maybe going a little too Nietzsche with my answer.
No, I appreciate the thought. Again, that's my take. I wanted the audience to answer for themselves.
Well, you were talking earlier about the vision casting that you hope that we return to. It seems when I listen to the visions of our political leaders that they're approaching these visions, because I don't think it's accurate to say they have zero vision. It's just a really, really incomplete one. And here's what I mean by that, is they are very quick to point out the things that they don't like. And so to take Trump and Kamala's biggest issues, for example, Trump says immigration is really, really bad. Here's the things that are wrong with it. Kamala, abortion, the Dobbs decision was terrible, terrible, awful, evil. We're going to take it back. Okay. They're very clear about what's wrong that they want to change. They're a lot less clear about how they're going to fix it. But what they do not have, which I think you want, is a clear positive vision of what we're moving towards. So in other words, they have a negative vision of this is the thing that's wrong with the country, and we need to cut out the tumor. What they're not saying is, hey, here's how much better things could be if we just did this. And that seems to be missing in a big way. And when it's missing from companies, they die out very quickly. When it's missing from companies, we get focused only on the negative. This is that product's no good. We need to change that up. Or this process is no good. We need to get rid of that. Or that person in that leadership position, they need to get fired. But there's never anything positive that we're moving toward. And if we're not moving toward anything positive, there's no reason to innovate. There's no reason to take risks. There's no reason to be creative. No reason to invest a lot of money. Where do you stand on that interpretation I'm laying out?
I agree with you. If you look at the scripture says where there's no vision, the people perish. So I think that's a leadership statement baked in scripture. There's no question that companies like Blockbuster didn't have a vision. They were really clear about what they were not going to do. And what they were not going to do is use the internet to their advantage. Right. But it was even more buffoonery than that. If you actually look into the Blockbuster story, what you find is that they were making the lion's share of their revenue, they were making from late fees. Boneheads like me who were supposed to turn in the video on Sunday night, and I forgot, and I got busy, and I turned it in on Tuesday, and I'm paying a late fee. That's where most of their revenue was coming from, not the actual rentals. And so what happened was this company who set out to do whatever their initial vision was, however they would have stated it, to bring, movies to Americans' homes and blah, 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 make family night, whatever. At some point, they started realizing that Americans were busy and irresponsible. And they were getting to charge late fees and no one was griping about it.
Yeah.
And so they look up and somewhere along the line, they were like, man, this is great. We don't have to innovate. We don't have to worry about Netflix all of a sudden coming along and they're going to mail you your DVDs to your house and then you stick them back in the mail. They're a Johnny come lately. That'll never work. We're rolling. Look what we did in late fees last month. And what happened was, to your point, there was no vision going forward. How will Americans' habits change based on technology? And so, wham, they never even thought about it. They weren't concerned about it. There was no vision at all. It was just status quo. Let's keep getting late fees. And before you know it, Netflix comes along and puts them out of business. That's a stark example of what it's like when there is no vision, no continuing vision. And again, you must change your vision from time to time based on society and culture and trends and business norms and all kinds of things. But their vision, their initial why could have stayed the same. But how they were going to go about doing that would have changed. In other words, vision is where and mission is how. How do we get it done? And so they didn't adapt. And so again, on this national discourse, there are slogans and there are some policy ideas. But I'll go back to Ronald Reagan. The last time that I think I saw an American president match a vision with policy very, very clearly. And he did it. And again, won with massive amounts of Democrats. So I think the proof is in the pudding. At the national level, we Americans put too much emphasis on who is president. I will tell you, It does matter. There's no question about it. But people will unite and vote for somebody in another party if they feel like there is a compelling vision that supersedes their traditional politics. And we've seen that in our history before. And I think coming out of the Trump era, I think we're going to need something like that. It remains to be seen if we will get a unifying character.
Well, I think regardless of who wins, even if Trump doesn't win, that is not going to be enough to change the discourse in our country. I don't think that.
Not at all.
I don't think a Kamala victory is what pulls us out of it. I think you're right. Someone who comes in and is a charismatic leader who can move us in a new direction. Do you think though that that's all it takes? Is it we have some person who comes in charismatic, they're a Reagan-esque figure, and they move us in that direction? Or is there something that needs to happen within the culture to prime us so that we can be ready to receive that character if they were to come on the scene?
I do think that you're going to have to see a wholesale rejection. This is we the people here. This is not a political character that comes on the scene that does this. But I think you have to see a wholesale rejection of identity politics. I really do. I think you're going to have to see a lot of the American people go, okay, we did this for a while. Maybe I was a part of it, or I kind of put up with it. But at some point, there needs to be a collective disgust around this identity politics right now. And what I mean by identity politics is everything is, I will either like you or not like you based on who you vote for or what you believe. As opposed to this, look, you can be passionate about your cause, but this demonizing of other people who may not see life the way you see it. Either you're with me or you hate me and thus I hate you. This is where we are. Either you're with me, like, do you agree with this? Well, no, not quite. You are a bad person and you hate me and thus I must hate you. I really do think that's where we are, certainly with the younger generations.
It definitely seems like on the identity politics piece, we have even deeper, identities that are rooted in our social class and race and gender and all. There are identities that are deeper than a political identity that now have become a political identity, right? We are encouraging people to vote based on these other identity characteristics. And that's where it's really, really dangerous. Then you get strong racial division and religious division that now becomes also political division and amplifies all of those already existing divisions. I'm a lot less optimistic that that's going to change. So if you're telling me we've got to reject identity politics in order to return to civility, I see how that tracks.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm saying that would have to happen. And the media and social media are contributing to this big time.
Sure.
Media and social media are playing to our greatest fears, making us distrust one another. So the question becomes, how will social media evolve over the next 5 to 10 years? Will the collective, I listen, there's a part of me that wouldn't be shocked if a large portion of the country went, just stop this nonsense. Stop. Enough.
And why, what do you think would motivate that part of the country to reject it?
They've had it. They're up to here with it. Like, stop this nonsense. Like, the media and social media keep telling us that we hate each other when in all reality, we don't hate each other. Like, we're all so freaking busy. I'm just going to use me as an example. Okay. I got one kid in college. I got 2 in high school. I got 2 golden doodles and I got a wife. I got a great job and I've got great friends and I got one really awesome hobby. Okay. You take all of that I just mentioned and you shove it into a 24-hour day and then you shove it into a full week, a full month, and a year. Here's the reality. I don't have time to sit around thinking about people that I disagree with and then I must hate. But if you ask me a question on what I think about a social issue, I have an opinion and I know what I believe and I know why I believe it. But I will tell you, juxtapose my opinion on a social issue or an economic issue. You could go down the list today and you could say, Ken, what do you think about this, 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 this? I have an opinion on all of it because I pay attention and I know what I believe and why. Now, you could take all those positions and then you juxtapose it with my life and what I've got going on that I just described for everybody. And the reality is that I know what I believe and I know why I believe it, but I don't spend half a second on a normal day, in a normal week, in a normal month, in a normal year. I don't spend half a second demonizing and hating people who don't agree with me. I just don't. And I think most Americans are that way. And I think a person should go, you know what, this is what I believe on this social issue, and it's very personal to me. And I know that you believe differently on this social issue, and it's very personal to you. And yet we can be civil and we can be two human people and go, if we want to talk about it, how about I ask questions and I listen, and then you ask questions and you listen, knowing that neither one of us are going to change each other's minds. But if we seek to understand, then I think you can have civility. And I just think that most Americans are in that bucket. They look at these kids on college campuses losing their ever-loving minds and being violent. They look at riots and they think, and they go, this is not, I didn't sign up for this. This is not how I want to live.
Well, I do agree with you. And I think even on the college campus, that is not the majority of students. I think even on a college campus, most people are probably more of the demeanor that you described yourself having.
I just want to go to class and I'd like to hang out with my friends on the weekend. I'd like to walk from one thing to the next, do my exercise on campus without having to reroute around a riot.
But having said that, even though that may be the majority, if that majority is not loudly rejecting and clearly fighting against this opposite mindset, the identity politics itself, what good is it that the majority, I mean, we don't need the majority to have a revolution. We just need a good, strong, loud, maybe 10% of the population. And then now you can have a civil war over that. So how do we go from, even though this is the majority?
Yeah, I mean, if you're asking in the context of what we've been talking about, my point, you and I were making the point here, I think the point I was making is that I think enough people for it to change identity politics to change, enough people have got to go, enough of this crap. We're not going to listen to this. We're not going to.
But what does enough of this crap mean? Like, what do you,
well, it means
what do you
got
do
college
other than
presidents,
just have general distaste?
Well, you got parents saying we're not sending our kids to these schools anymore.
Okay, that's a big step. Yeah.
I mean, you're asking a very complex question. I mean, it's hard for me to give you such a simple answer, but I mean, that's one example where people just stop putting up with this crap. Bystanders don't watch it. They see something crazy going on. They see some riot or whatever, and some good citizen comes along and puts them in a chokehold and chokes them out. Yeah, I do. You say, oh, Ken, that's a violent response. Not really. You just choked them out for a second and just put them down. Okay, great. And we're going to stop this stuff. Good people are going to stand up and not let bad things happen. We have too many people just walking along, allowing this stuff to happen and speaking up and taking a stand. Doesn't mean you're punching people out. I'm using an extreme example, but we've seen this before. I saw this video recently where some military guy came in and just choked a dude, just kind of got him like this, calmed him down, and the guy gave up the fight, didn't even make him unconscious, and just boom, calmed him down. He didn't beat the crap out of him, right? But this kid was threatening somebody else. This is a random story I saw. So that's an extreme example of standing up. But a more common is what I think is going to happen is I think the American people are going to go, all right, I'm off this app. I'm done. I'm not going to engage in this. I'm retreating. I'm going to use my attention, which means my dollars, and I'm going to protest that way. And we're not going to put up with this crap. So I'm not going to send my kids to these schools. and pay exorbitant tuition for this kind of circus clown stuff to be going on. So I think, and I also think that you'll see it at the polls. So I think through the polls, through people's money, I think people standing up going, we're not putting up with this crap, taking over school boards. That's what would have to happen is okay, we've allowed the circus to operate over here and infect us a little bit, and no more. The adults are going to take over. And it would be as though a teacher were to faint or something, and they come take care of the teacher and take them out of the classroom, and the kids are inside the classroom, they're going haywire. It would take 3 or 4 adults, maybe some parents that were on the scene or from the school office to go in, and we walk in and we get control of the situation. That's the metaphor. And again, I'm trying to simplify and I love the question, but it's very complex. But I think it is an overall tenor, and I think we're getting there. I think we're getting there. This small portion of the population that we would call woke, I think they've had far too much freedom and I don't want to use the word freedom because I'm all for free speech. They've had far too much of a resistance-free temper tantrum.
Okay.
And I think it's time for the adults to go, okay, you're done. Get up and get in the car. You're not going to lay down in the parking lot and throw a temper tantrum. And I think the temper tantrum is getting on people's nerves. And that's what I'm trying to get at. I'm all for free speech. I will always protect free speech, no matter how obnoxious or how crazy it is. I am a free speech guy. I think you have the right in America to get up and say and do say something, not do something, but you have the right to say whatever you want to say. And so that's my point. I just think that the American people are fed up.
Maybe it does start at the local stage. Civil protests at the school board meeting, at the protest that's right in front of you. And if somebody is looking to save the world and change the direction of the country, probably not going to happen. But we can change our own little community. We can change the tone and tenor in our city council meeting, et cetera. And if that's where you're saying, hey, that's where change is going to start to blossom, well, I could start to be optimistic. I could start to be a little bit more optimistic like you are.
Yeah. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. Now we'll see what happens. But I just think that America's, the conversation around politics, the conversation around values, the conversation around freedom, I think it's at a boiling point right now. And I hope we don't get to the levels of a civil war. I hope we don't. That would grieve me and scare me to death. And I don't think it has to get there. I think you can stand up, and I think you can clamp nonsense down without violence. I do believe that. But I will tell you, it's going to take some people standing and taking a stand and saying enough of this nonsense. This is not who we are. We are better than this. And let's act like adults, for crying out loud. I do think that can happen. But to your point, if it doesn't happen, then you create a sense of desperation. And then when you get to a place of desperation, that's when you have things like civil wars break out.
And in a way, I think what you're describing is a return to the values of the country, to return to find what we're united on, or what we can unite around. And that way we can collectively reject the things that exist in conflict with those values.
Yes. And yes. And that's why I'm saying, to me, if I could wave a wand today and make one thing go away, an ill in our country, I would make identity politics go away.
Well, I hope that does happen, and I hope that magic wand of yours works.
Yeah, me too.
When it comes to a company, sometimes we get into a spot like that too, where the culture has deviated from whether it's Blockbuster or any other massive failure. The culture has deviated from what it was originally intended to be. Our purpose is no longer identifiable. We can't see that the direction we're moving is where we set out to go. Friend of the podcast, Doug Lennox, he said, business does not exist to earn money any more than you and I exist in order to breathe. There's a bigger purpose for our existence, and there's a bigger than just what we do. But we have to make money and we have to breathe, otherwise we'll die. And when a business like Blockbuster, to use the example from earlier, becomes so focused on breathing, their late fees, they're going to die. And when that exists within a company, it seems like leaders have a lot of work to do to identify it early, because it's challenging. It's challenging to say, hey, we're focusing all our energy on this cash cow, this thing that seems to be working. But if we keep doing that, it's going to be the death of us. For politicians, identity politics is working. That's why it's popular. That's why they do it. But they have to recognize that ultimately that's going to lead to death, and we have to stop, even though this next election, it might work.
Well, back to something I said earlier, just to kind of freak everybody out. Our politicians and our political parties, they thrive on chaos. They are creating chaos because when a people feel as though their life is chaotic, they look to authority.
Yeah.
So make no mistake that a lot of the politicians and the media, let's call the media and politicians the ruling class. There's an enormous amount of people in the ruling class who want to see us divided, who want to see us angry, who see a certain amount of chaos. They like it because they thrive off of it. Never forget that. And so we, the people, this was meant to be a people of the people, as Lincoln said at the Gettysburg Address, of the people, by the people, for the people. And it is now of the elite, by the elite, for the elite. Make no mistake about that. And so this is a bigger philosophical problem. And we, the people, actually do have the power to change it. But we're all kind of just going about doing our thing. And at some point, either we leave the room and turn the lights off, if you will, or we come back in the room and turn the lights on and say, let's clean this crap up.
Well, I hope we do turn the lights on soon. Thanks so much for being here, Ken.
Yeah, thank you.
Where can people find you and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, KenColeman.com is the website, and they can connect with me on social media from there. I'm on Instagram at Ken Coleman, on Facebook, X, YouTube, The Ken Coleman Show on YouTube. So all the places. But if you're just looking for one place to remember to connect with me, KenColeman.com.
Well, thanks, Ken.
Thanks.
At one point in our conversation, Ken quoted Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish. And he applied that toward our political environment as a whole. I look at it through the lens of a business owner. Where there's no vision, the people perish. The employees, the company, the clients, there has to be a clear vision. And what I noticed, or what I realized talking to Ken, is that everybody thinks they have a vision. Everyone's going to attempt to create a vision. Very rarely is someone ever going to tell you that having a vision is stupid. But a good vision and a great vision are very different. And they're both very different from a bad vision. But what does a great vision do? A great vision positively moves you toward action that is going to illuminate a new world, motivated by a certain value set. It's not outcome oriented. It's process focused. It's action focused. That vision is focused on the actions that we can control, not the outcomes we hope to obtain. And by focusing on those actions, we will attain an intangible result, a overarching vision that's bigger than any individual goal. A great vision is, like Simon Sinek describes, that of an infinite gain, something that we can pursue endlessly forever. And the Israelites arrived in the promised land, but in a way, they're moving toward the promised land all the time. And that's what makes a compelling vision.
You just made a great decision to listen to this episode of Decidedly. Make another great decision by subscribing to the show and leaving us a review wherever you're listening. We appreciate the support. It helps business owners like you find our community and defeat bad decision-making in their own lives. For more decision-making insights, check us out at decidedlypodcast.com, on Instagram at decidedlypodcast, or grab a copy of Sanger and Sean's books from the links in the show notes. Finally, we'd like to thank Shelby Peterson of Transcend Media for editing and post-production of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm Morgan, your producer, and this is Decidedly.